Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us to talk about a fascinating issue: the cyber attacks at MGM and Caesars in Las Vegas. And I know for a lot of folks joining us today, you are likely not working at a casino. Some of you are. But this is just one of those attacks that has made worldwide headlines and is fascinating for all of the reasons that we'll talk about. The attackers talking out loud, or writing about the attack. MGM and Caesars, both major tourist attractions. And certainly for MGM, it going on for days and days and days and days and days. So, lots to talk about here. And so thank you so much for joining us as we go through this. And what we'll do is talk about, what happened. We'll talk about, what we've seen in terms of, different reports out there, and talk about, how to talk about it within your organization. I see that in the chat, people have started saying where they're joining from. Let us know where you're joining from. Always good to see you all. Um, so, for those of you who haven't been to our events before, there's a chat on the right. If for some of you it's going ding, 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 there's a little bell at the top, and you can click the bell and it'll mute. If you want it to ding, you can unmute it. Everybody who registered will get a recording of this, and we will send out the slide deck as well. For those of you who don't know us, we defend critical infrastructure against cyber attack. We do work with tribes, and some of the casinos that they own as well. We help organizations prepare for a cyber attack, detect them quickly, and respond decisively. Um, and joining me today on this panel, Mike Hamilton and Fred Langston, both founders of the company. Mike's former CISO of the city of Seattle. Fred had led our consulting organization for a long time, and worked with a lot of casinos, a lot of tribal organizations. Brad Swanson is a gaming industry vCISO who is on our staff. John Luke Peck, who will join in a little bit. Oh, look, there he is. I say his name and he shows up. He runs incident response for us. And I want to be clear, we are not doing the incident response for MGM or Caesars. And so, we can't answer questions about what's going on internally there. And my name is Jake Milstein. I run our events here at Critical Insight. If you have a question that you don't want to put in the chat, but you want me to ask the team here, just email Jake at criticalinsight.com. Happy to take questions that aren't in the chat. I would also say I'm happy to take questions in the chat. If you have something in the chat and you want me to interrupt and ask questions, that is the best part of our events. Is they're live, ask questions. I love interrupting and asking your questions, so feel free to throw it in there. All right, Mike, why don't you kick us off here? Run people through what happened.
Okay, well, first let's talk about all of the stuff that hits the media that we shouldn't react to quickly until the dust settles. And there's a significant amount of dust yet to settle. Because when everybody heard about this at first, we heard about MGM on September 14th. They were actually, I believe, September 8th or September 7th is when they detected this. And then right after that, we heard about Caesars. And so everybody was going, oh my God, all the casinos are under attack. Turns out there's more to it than that. It's more nuanced than that. And so we've been digging for a few days, and we're going to give you the benefit of the digging. And a lot of you have probably done the same digging. And let me just say that the fact that there's hundreds of people that signed up for this indicates to me that you guys all gamble. I mean, there's no other reason for this
Isn't
kind of
I mean,
message.
isn't doesn't everybody in IT gamble? Isn't that how this works?
Well, not necessarily for money, but yeah, I
Mhm.
test and prod. Yeah. Moving on. So the first thing we heard about was MGM had shut down all of their stuff, and there were room keys affected. The being able to create a reservation for their hotel rooms affected. ATMs didn't work. All of the things that you see there kind of fell over. The thing that grabbed everybody's imagination was, hey, the the slot machines don't work. And so there's one of the signs there that they had in the middle of the casino. Apparently, they've been able to get back online, but they're still having problems, and they're having to pay people in cash. And so there's people walking around the casino floor with bags of cash, which is probably not the condition that the casinos want to persist. Um, then we heard, and actually, Brad had a friend who does a lot of dark web scanning, who said that there was this chatter about how they got in, and it involved mining LinkedIn for information on some employees there, calling the help desk and asking for a password reset. And then there was an announcement from an organization that we'll point out here in a minute that said, wow, all it took was 10 minutes on the phone to get into a $33 billion organization. And no, that's not entirely true. That may have provided the initial access, but after that point, they do what these attackers do: is they gain persistence, they elevate privilege, they get to an administrator level, and then they can do whatever they want. And so that took some time. And apparently, the Okta agent was what facilitated this. And so there are some known vulnerabilities there. And as we find out about this group, um, this is kind of their MO. So we'll get to the TTPs, right? Techniques, tactics, procedures, tools, whatever TT stands for. There's some confusion there, especially with me. But they're experts at retrieving credentials and misusing credentials. So there's a lot more to it than, hey, 2 casinos got hit. It's probably the same gang. Casinos are under attack. Oh my God. No, that's not what's going on. All right. So here we have all of the things that we say were disrupted. And then it was 9/13. So 3 days after the initial event, they filed an 8K filing. The reason this comes out in an 8K filing and not just in the media or through some other reporting mechanism, like trying to identify users and talk to them, and they say, oh, this thing happened. An 8K filing is the new requirement from the SEC. When you determine you're a publicly traded organization and you determine that some cyber event is going to have a material impact on the business, and there's a definition for that. We don't need to go into it now. So they did what they were supposed to do, and they filed their 8K, and that's how everybody's found out about this. Well, now Moody's is saying, this could negatively impact their credit rating. Well, of course. And the attack highlighted key risks within the company that yet persist. So Moody's is saying that this is a symptom of a greater issue with this casino organization, and we feel that there's going to be a long-term impact from that. And you can see that the losses have been estimated, somewhere between $5 and $8 million a day. Yeah, that's likely to have a material impact. The rest of the material impact is likely to be customer flight. Depending on whether or not another shoe drops here. I don't want to spoil this for everybody, but so far we don't know about any records being lifted out of MGM. It was just ransomware. They are saying they're not going to pay. That's why there's probably another shoe that's going to drop. Anybody want to comment on any of this stuff? I think it's pretty straightforward. This is just the way of the world right now. You're going to make these public reports through the SEC. They complied with that. Now we all know what's going on. Okay.
And hey, and Fred, I think you're trying to talk and you're on mute. I do want to go back to one quick thing before you go to that, which is, Mike, on that first slide,
that one?
this one, the social engineering, the bad guys said that they use social engineering. We don't have confirmation of that, right? I mean, what we're going off of is what the bad guys have said. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true, but I have no reason to doubt this. It's completely plausible.
Yeah, the CEO of Okta has come out and said that this actually is how this happened. He ironically said, yeah, it was an 8-minute initial attack, but it was incredibly complex, the things that happened after that. So people are really focusing on, hey, it only took, a phone call and some voice phishing approach, and I've got creds and I'm in. They did get a lot that way, but the real damage was done after they deployed, or let's say utilize, the Okta agent to do its bidding. In fact, it really might not be a flaw. The CEO of Okta says That's a feature that they took advantage of, not a bug. So
Mhm.
we're going to learn a lot about how to probably secure this better. And a lot of this is with particular types of notices to people when they're getting MFA kind of requests. There's a lot of recommendations they're putting out there for that.
And how much do we know about what the social engineering was? Like it was a phone call, right?
To help
Yeah, it was a
desk.
request for a password reset.
Yeah, it's a password reset from a highly privileged user, which has been known to be part of a current campaign of Okta users are getting this exact campaign, seeing it across industry. It's not just big gaming; it's Okta people are getting it, and frankly, anybody that has a unified identity provider like Okta is going to be subject to the same kinds of approach to
Yeah.
attacks.
Yeah, and I mean, I assume they had 2FA on, so both password. Somebody just put it in the chat. Password and MFA reset.
Yep. Yep.
Yes,
And
correct.
what Fred mentioned there, that they're going after these highly privileged accounts, is the kicker, because they're not just calling up and saying, "Hi, I'm so and so in accounting," or "I'm so and
Right.
so, with low level normal user with normal type of access roles." They're saying, "Hi, I'm the domain administrator," or "I'm the enterprise administrator, and I can't get into my account. I need you to reset my MFA," and then they use that to break in. That then gets them essentially domain admin level access inside the environment potentially. What they're also saying, and this is potentially coming from the attack group as well, so take this with a grain of salt, is that they then use that access to go and hang out on the Okta server. So they're sitting there not just using Okta to get into the network, but then they're also infiltrating the Okta server running on the on-premise or cloud-enabled environment there, and they're watching the traffic moving across the Okta server to lift other credentials and potentially other MFA tokens out of it. So if that plays out the way that they're presenting it, essentially that gives them potentially free run of just about any account, because they've got the ability to brute force and reverse the password coming out of Active Directory. So they've got the usernames and passwords to begin with, and then they're sitting there watching the credentials and the tokens and the MFA tokens move across the wire as well. So that then lets them essentially skip MFA, or at least take ownership of it. So yeah, this is definitely more than just a traditional, like, please run my malware, okay, now I have your network type of thing. They're taking over administrative accounts from the inside and then using that to move further inside the environment.
It's also worth noting that they made the claim that all of their OSINT, in other words, targeting, identifying who those highly privileged individuals were, was all done through LinkedIn.
Yep.
So rather than running some of the tools we run that look at thousands of different sources, they went to one and were able to determine who these privileged users were.
Good old LinkedIn, one-stop shop for bad guys.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we mention too, like the headlines are saying that, social engineering is becoming a powerful tool against casinos. It doesn't just stop there. Social engineering and, LinkedIn scanning to find employees, that applies to all of us. You don't have to be a casino for this to be a threat to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I mean,
might
I
need to
think,
be an
and
Okta user.
yeah, I mean, I think what Brad said there is exactly right, which is, and we could talk about this before we do the whodunit, is, this, when an attack happens like this, it's so, there's so much notoriety, there's so much to talk about. Every organization, says, hey, could this happen to me? And certainly, boards and CEOs ask that question. And so, we're as we talk today, think about social engineering, thinking about how different, if you're Okta users, how Okta, works, that matters for everybody here. All right, Mike, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about who did this. Okay. We're still talking about MGM. We have not moved on to Caesars yet. So there's a gang and a product, right? Alfie, Black Cat ransomware. That is a large established gang. This one, the one that's been blamed, or the one that's taken credit, responsibility, whatever, Scattered Spider. Now, that is a smaller affiliate organization that works along with the Black Cat ransomware gang. And there's lots of these affiliates. This ecosystem has blown up like crazy. Part of the reason for that is because there's a whole lot of tech people with a whole lot of skills getting laid off, and there's a whole lot of money to be made right here. The risk is insanely low. It turns out, based on reporting and based on what's been said by the FBI, this is a group, not kidding, of teenagers in the US and the UK doing this. So kids that have grown up as native computer users are now coming into their own and finding out that maybe I don't want to go in debt for a college education and then go on that gerbil wheel. I'm just going to steal a bunch of money and call it good. That's a big trend right now. So, they VX Underground was the one that said, hey, it looks like this big corporation got compromised by a short phone call. And they're coming back and saying, no, it was more sophisticated than that. We're actually better than that. So there's this really interesting dialogue that's gone on. And a lot of this has come out in tweets. And I think they posted a bunch of stuff on GitHub. But the gang is trying to make it sound like they're more sophisticated than just, hey, we socially engineered our way in and dropped some ransomware. Here's VX Underground saying this, and you can read their what they say about this. This was a little hyperbolic, and of course, this got under the skin of the gang. And so here's all they did to compromise was hop on LinkedIn, find an employee, and then call the help desk. Essentially, that is true. That did happen. They definitely got on LinkedIn. They mined it for information, and there's a lot of ways that information like that can be abused, right? SIM swapping is one that has been prevalent as well. But mining LinkedIn for enough information to convince someone at a help desk that you are who you're trying to impersonate is fairly successful. So I think one of the takeaways from this is we all need to harden up against this tactic right here. All right. So here's where the gang has to come back and say, no, it was really more than that, right? Was it a 10-minute phone call, or was that just the initial access? And it's not clear to me, and maybe one of you can verify this. And I heard you say this, Fred, that the original account was an administrative account. And from what I've read, and the stuff, media is all over the place on this. From what I've read, they had to escalate privileges after getting in to get that DA. But here they are, the TTPs that they used, all right, are known to the public and relatively easy for anyone to imitate. What that means is, and remember, all this you have to take with a big rock of salt, is that they're using off-the-shelf tools. So again, this tracks with native computer users dropping into this ecosystem, finding out that there are these parent organizations, including ransomware as a service, where they can access these tools and use them very freely. There's probably a fee to pay for something like this, but it makes it easy. There is not a high degree of sophistication in the use of the tools, but the planning and the tactics they use, they do show some fair amount of sophistication here.
Hey, and there are a couple of questions in the chat. Corey says, did they exfiltrate data and extort MGM by threatening release or just ransomware? Do we know?
Yeah. Well, this is a really good question. So what we know is what's been reported, and so far it's ransomware. And the gang does say, if you guys don't pay us, we have other stuff that we are going to pull, and we're still in the network. So, the speculation is, they're going to come up and they're going to say, okay, now we have all these records. And, again, spoiler, when those records are made public, or even if it is determined that those records were accessed, there are knock-on effects that may dwarf the amount of money that they have to pay in terms of an extortion demand.
Yeah, I find this one of the more interesting components, that if they do in fact pay to get their data back, they're basically just buying the list of people that they need to then notify and who they would be sued by in a class action lawsuit, because it will all be discoverable, which kind of leads to do I really want to pay to get my data back? Because then I've set myself up for fully discoverable, class action suit.
Yep. So Mo here is asking, what are they using for persistence? Cobalt Strike? No, they're using compromised accounts. They're in the network. They are persisting in there as authorized users. I read somewhere, again, this is the dust, that there was a Cobalt Strike that was dropped in there, and that's where Mimikatz and a bunch of the other tools for some of the password,
was a Cobalt Strike drop that stuff was being launched from. Again, the stuff will all get confirmed in 6 months, you know, when they finally come out with the official report. But that's the early stuff. Is they did drop some of the standard tools, and we're using some of the standard techniques.
And there's a question that Aaron asked, and Brad, I want to bring you in here. So it just so happens that Brad did a presentation recently about why bad guys do what they do. And Aaron is asking the question here: is all of their talk and refuting of details strictly an ego move? Why expose yourself any more than necessary? Brad, what do you think? I mean, why are they? Why the public statements?
Yeah, I think that it was inappropriately attributed in the early days by folks that didn't have the whole story. And this is not to speak ill of like VX Underground or anybody else or any of the news agencies that tried to break the story. But if it was reported wrong, I think a lot of it is going to be ego. That group didn't do it. We did that. We should get the credit for doing this. And it also is going to show that they have the skills to do that. So, it kind of builds them up in a way. So I think a lot of it is ego driven.
Well, keep in mind, no money's been paid. So the only thing they have left is ego at this point.
Yep.
I mean, do you think? I mean, so at this point, and let's jump into that. Like, let's say, usually in a ransomware attack, right? Somebody says, "Hey, give me $10 million, $20 million, 30, whatever it is, $100 million, whatever the amount is, and pay me now." But as it goes on, there must be some time at which the bad guys realize they're not going to get paid, right? I mean, is that what's happening here, Fred?
So, well, the bad guys are saying they're going to keep their persistence. They're claiming they still have persistence. Whether that's true or not, we'll find out. They say they're going to continue the attacks. They say they believe they can wear down the casinos with these attacks, and frankly, they may. The thing that amazes me is usually the insurance company will jump into the middle of this and say, we are going to pay the ransom, whether you like it or not, because we want this to end. So there's that. Maybe they're self-indemnified. They're huge. They have a lot of money. Maybe they don't have insurance, right? So a lot of interesting components there.
Yeah. And hey, John Luke, maybe you can jump into this one because there's been a lot of questions in the chat about it. There's some confusion around how, if there was MFA, how they can get in by making a phone call. How, like, if you're a bad guy, how do you do that?
So that's where the social engineering component comes in. You'll hear this referred to as phishing or vishing, which is voice phishing, essentially trying to social engineer somebody by phone or by voicemail. From what we're seeing in the public reporting, it sounds like the attackers called the help desk and said, I am John Q admin for MGM. Like, I've got domain admin accounts and I can't get in right now because my MFA is not working. And so the help desk then thinks, well, you sound like a normal employee. You seem to have the information that a normal employee would have. So I'm going to reset your password and I'm going to reset your Okta account for you. I'm going to reset your MFA credentials so that way you can get back into your account here because clearly you're an employee trying to get into the network and we want to facilitate that. Now, if this was a normal employee, that would be great. The employee would be back at work. Everybody would be moving along and doing their thing, and this wouldn't be an issue. But it was hackers instead. And those hackers then used that access to work their way further into the network. And so it's that first stage, that social engineering component of pretending to be an employee, convincing help desk you are that employee, and then getting them to reset the password and the MFA, which then gives the attacker full control over the account. MFA at that point is working exactly as intended. It's just working for the wrong person right there. This is something which Okta themselves had come out in early September, like Fred had mentioned, and they had said, we're seeing this. We're seeing these kinds of attacks where attackers are calling an organization's help desk, pretending to be somebody with elevated user accounts, so somebody with admin rights on the network or domain admin or whatever, and then getting them to reset the password, getting them to reset the MFA credentials. And when you've got both of those in place in control of the attackers, the account is essentially compromised at that point. They've got free run. They're able to sign in. They're going to be looking like they're doing normal activities. The only things at that point that are going to set off alarm bells are if, one, the real employee raises their hand and says, hey, wait a minute, I didn't trigger this reset, or I can't get into my account anymore, and calls the help desk again. Or if they start trying to connect up from someplace very abnormal. Like if you're a US based business and suddenly you've got logins coming in from Sri Lanka, that should raise a couple of red flags here. Most organizations, most of these attack organizations are smart enough that they know to route their traffic through proxy sites. So if they're an international organization going after a US business, they're going to take over a US computer on a university network or somebody's, malware laden home computer or whatever, and then use that as the jumping off point to work their way into the rest of the organization. So that way it looks like it's coming from inside the US. But ultimately, the big challenge for an organization there is that frontline defense, making sure that the help desk is not trying to be too helpful, not taking too little information to verify an employee. Anytime you've got somebody calling up, especially at a large organization, to say, I am so and so, I can't get into my account, I need you to reset me. There should be a whole identity verification process which goes on there. It should be as stringent as when you call your bank to say, I need to move $100,000 around. I need to do XYZ with my credit report, whatever. They're going to put you through a pretty stringent verification process. They're going to want to know your address, potentially your social security number, your date of birth, your family's maiden name, all this kind of stuff, up to and including security questions that you have provided the answers to. Too many organizations don't have that kind of verification process in their organization. They're relying on the help desk to say, yes, I know who this person is, or that voice doesn't sound familiar, so I'm not going to give this person that information here. This is unfortunately also the exact same type of social engineering that occurs with organizations who suffer from wire fraud attacks. When somebody emails in to say, hi, I'm your customer, here's my new bank information, I need you to send this overdue payment, or I need you to send this invoice here to this new bank address, and that bank is actually the First International Bank of Ukraine or whatever. It's that same kind of verification process where the finance team should have gone through a whole set of procedures to verify the person on the phone or verify the person on the other end of the email, but they just take that information, plug it into the accounting system, and send a bunch of money out the door. In this case, it's that same type of process. They're just giving the attackers access to a user account, or in this case, a domain admin user account, which then lets them run wild across the network.
Yeah.
One of the issues that we see with this too is a lot, especially with larger organizations, you tend to wind up with silos, right? So maybe the folks in your SOC that are watching your EDR, MDR, XDR solution, they might see something that kind of tickles their lizard brain a little bit, but they don't mention it because it's not enough to be a full-blown incident. But then the help desk is getting weird phone calls, and people in accounting are getting strange phishing emails. All those pieces together lead to something that's a targeted attack when you put all the puzzle pieces together. The problem is we're not talking to each other to find out where these puzzle places are taking place.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, as people add stuff in the chat and somebody says, what training? Yes, this is the time where you say this happened to MGM and we need to do training. If you're an IT director who's always wanted to have training, this is it. This is your time.
Well, this is pretty specific training too. This is not just general, here's how to avoid phishing. I mean, this is, anymore when we're talking about training and awareness and things like that, it's going to have to be tailored to roles because, executives and help desk employees need to hear different things clearly.
Yeah. I mean, especially, as Brad said, when you have these large organizations, and as somebody point out, the help desk has no idea who the actual users are in an organization this size. I mean, if you're in a smaller organization, you might know each other, but certainly with the turnover we've seen since COVID, and in help desk roles, right? That's a big problem, right, Fred?
Yeah, well, here's a bigger problem is how do you actually identify or verify the identity of those people calling in? Because, for example, today TransUnion announced a huge breach. If you look at the list of things that were included in that data, it was about every possible identity related question, except for who was your first pet, was included in there. So unless you have some very custom driven questions that are not standard, that are not things you could get out of an identity dump, which most of them unfortunately are, including your loan history. That's a common one. If they know your loan history, they'll say, out of these 5 things, did you have one of these as a loan? Well, the bad guys know that now. So we're running out of things to ask people. So now we have to start thinking about PINs, alternate forms of authentication to validate the identity when they call in.
Yeah, I mean,
for bio authentication, put your eyeball up to the camera,
Yeah, I mean, and somebody else said, make something up, have some secret code word, some secret thing that
A shared secret.
yeah, some shared secret that you don't get from from some breach. But
All right.
just
I'm going to keep this moving.
go ahead.
Okay. So we talked about the research, being done right? Mining LinkedIn for, targets. And, but here's where they're talking about, insider stock purchases that have occurred or not, and who's sold, who's bought, and looking at that and trying to judge the health of the business and exactly whether or not MGM is going to deal with them based on those purchases. This shows a higher level of thought being put into this than just, hey, we're a gang, pay us. I thought this was one of the most interesting things I read here. No insider has purchased any stock in the past 12 months, while insiders have dumped their shares for a combined $33 million, right? So that means, they believe that the stock price is on a downward trajectory, essentially. And we believe MGM is not going to agree to a deal. This in this context, this is where they're saying, well, we're still in there and we have other tricks. And what they said was, we have other attacks. So this is where I think records are going to come into scope. Okay. TTPs, and this is an important. This is probably the money slide here for all of this. These are all the things that this particular gang is good at, and it's not just this gang. These tactics, and because the tools are so freely available to do these things, whether or not you go out and you buy a commercial Cobalt Strike license, use a cracked copy, whatever. I mean, these tools are just available to everybody. So a lot of training on some of these tactics and then countermeasures for these, a lot of which are just going to be monitoring and being able to detect aberrational activity that suggests, they have achieved some kind of toehold in your network. That's the way to limit the impact here. So, right, SMS phishing, people are way too trusting of links they get over a text message that have no context. I just don't understand that. Somebody gets a link and nothing else, they go, oh, I'll check that out. Are you nuts? Right? Social engineering, this is where we were just talking about training your help desk. Credential harvesting, right? All over the place, right? Credential harvesting tool, right? There's known Okta vulnerabilities, right? Those Okta transactions are encrypted. These guys were sniffing them. Searching internal systems for credentials, flat files or spreadsheets lying around that say, these are all my passwords, .xls, right? And there's the famous cartoon about how to create a password. I think everybody should read that if you haven't already. Publicly available tools, again, to harvest credentials from internal repositories. There's this open source microburst tool to identify credentials in your Azure exposures, right? It's credentials, right? This is a take home. This is definitely something that we can all take away from this experience and go, okay, I'm going to apply this threat intelligence that we're seeing here, these TTPs of these gangs, and what just happened to these large corporations who are all spending a lot more money, we think. We'll get to casino security in a second and some of the observations that have been made by our own practitioners. But credentials, information stealers, and we're talking about information stealers. That's, you hit that link, it's pulling all your passwords out of your browser, right? Just by hitting the link. All right. And more, it's your cloud resources. So, look what they were able to provide in terms of verification information to impersonate an employee, personally identifiable information, right? I don't know if that was a social, but there was PII was part of that. So they did get challenged, right? Employee ID and username. How do you get username from LinkedIn? Well, there's other tools like Maltego that you can use. It's open source, it's freely available. So these things, take these to heart, because these are the things that we can take away and we can say, okay, here's some things that we can do, because it's likely that your executives are all asking you, what can we do about this? Did Fred get Comcasted again? Looks like
Fred.
he did.
Yeah, Fred lost internet. Has said it would be right back. Wait, go back.
Okay.
So, I mean, Brad, you work with all sorts of casinos. You work with, a number of organizations. Any of this surprise you?
Not really. Unfortunately, we get in. There are a lot of organizations that they do their best. We all have limited budgets, limited amount of headcount, so we do what we can. A lot of times, you'll see some of these TTPs. It's a spot that the organization just missed. Maybe they don't have really good training on what social engineering looks like. Some of the social engineers out there are very, very good at what they do. And there's a lot of tools that it's like a hammer. You can use a hammer to hammer a nail, or you can use a hammer to break into a car, right? A lot of these security tools out there are meant to be used for good, but it's very easy to use them for evil as well. And there's new tools every day, so it's constantly kind of a game of leapfrog.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's worth pointing out too that a lot of people
go ahead, Fred.
are leaning into living off the land, a concept where you use tools that are there like PowerShell and all the other tools that maybe you have for administrative purposes can just be turned against you. So you don't necessarily have to have a big hacking toolkit to do a lot of damage.
Right.
Yeah, and by the way, there is a question that came up in the chat about, was there an inherent weakness in Okta? And John Luke, you gave an answer to that.
Yeah, I think that's unclear right now. I don't think
There
what we're seeing
was.
is the result. Yeah, I personally I think that's debatable because this isn't like this isn't like Tyler Tech or Excellion, for example, where we've got these publicly accessible servers with a known exploit that attackers are able to throw some bad code at it, and now they've got access to the entire content here. This sounds to me, and again, I'm working entirely from public reporting, so I know we don't have all the facts on this, but it sounds to me they used social engineering to get into the environment, steal domain admin creds, and then pivoted onto the Okta servers themselves. Now, if they've got domain admin creds, which would let them onto the Okta servers, and they've got essentially admin rights on those Okta servers, they can inject their malware and they can sit there sniffing credentials.
Install tools.
Exactly. Yeah. If they just had user level accounts at that point, so let's say it wasn't an admin who they had social engineered the creds for. Let's say they break into somebody's user account by way of the help desk, but it's just a regular user account. If they were somehow able to inject malware onto the Okta server or escalate themselves up using Okta software in order to hang out on the Okta server and then do their badness, then I'd say, yeah, we're seeing an inherent weakness in Okta there. That would be, I think, a pretty clear exploit or a design problem. From what I'm seeing here, it sounds like they had admin rights, they got into the network, they used those admin rights to make changes on the Okta server. But I don't know if we would consider that to be a weakness. If the admin rights were protected like they ought to be, would they have been able to incur the same amount of damage here? I think that's going to be one of those X factor questions we may never fully get answered here.
Yeah. All right, Mike, you want to do Caesars?
Do I want to do Caesars? Well, I want to talk about it. So that was all MGM. That's what happened with MGM. So ransomware, lots of stuff down. Gang says, here's how we did it. After, VX Underground said, well, it was just a phone call. And they say, okay, no, here's how it really went down. And then a whole lot of talk about Okta and was it a vulnerability that they exploited? There was, 6 months ago, there was a big thing about Okta, and I can't remember if that was the one they had where their source code was disclosed. Maybe that was LastPass. But there was a reason we were about to go and we were about to do an Okta rollout. We said, whoa, 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 whoa. So I know that there was a vulnerability with Okta. I think that's since been corrected, but I think it was sniffing. But wait, there is more. So Caesars, yeah, they did pay. So they got whacked too. Now, this happened a day later. And apparently the original event was actually right around the same time that it happened to MGM, maybe a day later. And again, they had to report this through their 8K. So interestingly, they're kind of going, yeah, this is no big deal. Our insurance is going to cover it. We don't think this is material, but they still reported it in the 8K. And that's the reason you put it in the 8K. That's an up to the minute filing for, hey, investors, shareholders, this may have an impact on our share value. So apparently the gang originally wanted $30 million. They negotiated them down to half of that. And they took a lot of records out of there. So we're talking about driver's licenses and social security numbers, including Brad's. So Brad is obviously someone who's comfortable with giving a social security number to a casino. Not going to say anything about that. So, but here's the rub. The gang said, look, pay us. We promise we're going to delete all that stuff. We promise we're going to delete all that stuff. And they believe them. And this is in their filing, that they believe the crooks, that they're going to do this. So this is the beginning of Caesar's problem right now. Their problem is not over. They paid the ransom. There is no disruption. This is not over for Caesars. All right.
And with the social security number thing, you know,
and driver's license number too.
Yeah, anybody that gets a player's card for the casino, your driver's license, they scan that, and now that's in a database that's stored God knows where. If you hit a jackpot, whether you have a player's card or not, if you hit a jackpot on like a slot machine and they have to do a hand pay, you have to give them your social right then and there, because Uncle Sam wants their cut. So they have to be able to do all the tax documents on your winnings. And then the problem is they retain your social. Your social lives in that database forever. So even though I had a hand pay 3 years ago, my social was still in that database. So don't think that they are managing your data in a way that you would want them to all the time. It doesn't always work out that way.
And to be fair, I think I tried to book a hotel room around the DEF CON time period here, and they wanted my social security number just for booking a room. So like they're asking for a lot of information for a lot of normal customer activity there. So yeah, there are good questions about whether they're collecting too much information.
They're collecting too much information. And interestingly, this is one of the things that the federal government, as part of the national cybersecurity strategy, has said, listen, in order to devalue the records that continue to get stolen, we have to strictly limit what can be collected. So, you know, this is just going to add fuel to that fire. And, you know, I for one, you know, this whole thing about data collection and how you can be tracked and data gets sold to brokers and brokers will resell it to anybody, it's out of control. Okay, moving on. What's known about Caesars. So the gang that did MGM said, no, we didn't do that one. We don't know who did it so far. Caesars is not talking to anybody about this. And there's their quote. We have taken steps to ensure that the stolen data is deleted by the unauthorized actor, although we can't guarantee this result. Yeah, you can't guarantee this result. I don't know. There's either an insurance company or a legal team is advising these guys wrong. That's my opinion. Apparently the initial entry vector was through a third party, an outsourced IT support vendor, who is probably in a heap of trouble right now. I would not imagine that that person has remained employed, to tell you the truth. And here's what they say. They do not anticipate material impact. Insurance covered it. We had no real downtime. We're just going to go back to work. Really? Really? Okay. All right. Well, here comes the other shoe, dude. The class action has already started. Right. So, you know, in today's world, because there are privacy statutes, notably the first one in California Consumer Privacy Act. I don't know if you have one in Nevada. I would assume not in Nevada, but there's a lot of California residents that go to Vegas. So class action has been initiated. That happened Friday. We heard about this, all right, what, a week before? Right. So, I mean, there are attorneys just waiting for something like this to happen, and they're going to go out and start searching for plaintiffs. So Caesars, no, you're not getting out of this unscathed. You are absolutely not getting out of this unscathed. Did MGM have records stolen? Not that we can tell. So theoretically, they could just get out of the ransomware by restoring from backup and rebuilding, which is kind of why they're dragging their feet, determining whether or not they're going to pay this, you know, the extortion.
But I got a question there. I mean, once you know that bad guys have gotten into your network, can you really say no? They didn't get any They didn't get any PII.
And the bad guys have come out and said that they do have data from MGM, and they're going to look at it. If it looks like it contains PII, they're going to release it to Troy Hunt over at Have I Been Pwned, so that folks can look and see if their data has been compromised. But they're claiming that we don't have proof of that. We don't have any attribution that data was taken, but they are claiming that they did take some data from MGM.
Mm-hmm.
And
which is completely reasonable.
Your log should.
Yeah, to answer your question, Jake, there are ways to find that out. Yes.
And I guess my other question is, for Caesars here, like, okay, so they paid the bad guys got everything. They paid the ransom. They get to now trust the bad guys that they won't. Don't they still have to notify all of the people who might have been impacted that the bad guys might have to, or do they get to hide behind? No, we paid and we trust the bad guys. Fred, does that just work?
No, data's breached. The data's out. That doesn't matter. Now, if it's not something like California or HIPAA, where you don't have to show that the harm has been done, then you can bring a class action lawsuit. That's probably where they're going to lean in.
Mm-hmm.
Where other things you need to show that harm has been done. They stole my social and they use it to buy a new car or whatever, get a new loan.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have a tort. You can actually take them to court for that. But the class actions are going to be based in the statutes that don't need harm to be shown, just that your data was breached.
Okay.
And Caesars has already reached out to me saying, hey, we were breached, blah, blah, blah. They potentially got, driver's licenses and socials. They're going to be reaching out with more information as they complete their investigation, and they will be offering any of us that were affected security monitoring. So now I've got like 3 lifetimes worth of security monitoring. But yeah, they are going to.
Is it with
like that?
Is it with TransUnion?
Yeah, right. Which,
Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah, Jill's made a good mention in chat here that all those credit monitoring services want you to give them all your information so that they know what to monitor for, and then they go and get breached too. So, yeah.
To be more accurate, we never agreed to give those credit monitoring agencies any information, or credit agencies any information. They just have it. We never signed up with them. Right? It's just the way this weird ecosystem works.
Mike quietly supporting the overthrow of the credit union reporting agencies here, which I got to say, I think I'm behind that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So how do we use what do we take away from this? All right. So number one, going back a little bit, right? When we're talking about were records taken, MGM, were records taken? There's an insurance company in there right now. They brought in forensic experts. They're going through logs. They're finding if there's packet dumps, if they had, good logging facilities and they were retaining information for long enough. They're going through to find out, have databases been accessed? If they've been accessed, can we correlate that with an exfiltration event? Does the firewall see a bunch of data go out around that same time, from that source address in turn? So there are ways to figure this out. So if that is true, this is also going to end up as a class action for MGM. Right now, it's going to be class action for Caesars. That is actually the bigger impact. So even if Caesars paid $15 million, class action could dwarf that. Abso-freaking-lutely. Extortion through ransomware may be more survivable. So MGM, if you didn't lose records, you may get out of this and be able to rebuild from backup. You're going to have to prove that no records were taken. That's what they're in the middle of doing right now. They are really, really looking hard to find out whether or not any data were taken. Now, bad guys say they're still in there. Scattered Spider says they're still in there. Well, they're trying to confirm that as well and expunge them. In the meantime, they're out there saying that we do have records. So this is all still in a flux. And I'm just going to double down on this. We keep coming up to these privacy statutes. They have this private right of action. And that the one in California specifically says and I think Fred just said this, don't have to show harm in order to be a plaintiff, in order to have standing in a class. It's just the fact that you didn't protect my information. It is absurd that the harm to the public is so great, yet the private responsibility is all on that end corporation, that organization. And this is something we have to, we've got to address this, because we're doing this to ourselves. We're just going to run our own businesses out of business when this happens and make a bunch of lawyers rich because they're ambulance chasers waiting for these things to happen. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Now, study the TTPs, right? What we saw, in the boxes there with all those things that they use, phishing, smishing, vishing, right? All of these different techniques to try and hang a bad link in front of somebody or get them to perform some action. We've got to train people up on this, right? I would actually add to that, prohibit personal use on an organization's computing assets, right? It does no good to pay a bunch of money to clean up Outlook so that there's no bad links, no bad attachments, and you're letting your users use any old email service right next to that in a web browser with absolutely no controls. So they hit a link that looks like it came in from somebody they may know, and all of a sudden it stole all the credentials out of their browser. All right. It happened that fast. Right. So, personal use on a personal device, we've crossed that threshold, right? Gmail lives right here. All your social media right here, baby. Not on the corporate computer. All right. Cloud resources, cloud security posture management. There are new businesses doing that. We're looking at doing that. All of these tools, Mimikatz, Microburst, all the things that were mentioned there, they're IDS signatures for the use of these tools. That simple signature-based detection should be in place. And then, if it was me too, I think there was a suggestion in the chat, if you're going to have a shared secret, make it a fake one. Tell LinkedIn, hey, I used to live in, wherever you used to live, but the shared secret could be, I used to live in Detroit, when you've never been in Michigan. Have a shared secret that's a good technique too. So limiting employee information online or using some misdirection is not a bad technique either. Anybody want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I will add that if you go online and look at Critical Insight and you look all the staff we have, you'll find about 20 people that we don't know, do not work here, claim
That's
to
right.
work here, impersonating a role here, and we cannot get LinkedIn to do anything about it. So if you get a DM on LinkedIn from somebody from Critical Insight,
ignore it.
Make sure you know that person, because it might be somebody from China. Okay.
No, I mean, even if it's me, ignore it. I don't want to talk to anybody.
But hey, I want to bring in Brad here. So, because one of the important things here about study the TTPs and create action items for each is, look, at this point, and I just heard from one of our customers, they're looking at this and they're like, hey, this same thing could happen to me. I have a help desk, they're outsourced, same basic thing could happen. Brad, you provide vCISO work, which means Brad goes in and helps people with policies and builds security programs for them. Brad, as for the organizations that you vCISO with, how do you help them get there? What's your advice to them today here?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway is it doesn't matter where you're at. Security is not a destination. It's a journey, right? And we're all at different points on that journey. So we'll get into some orgs and they're pretty far on that journey. We get into other orgs and they're just starting out. It doesn't matter where you are. It's never too late to start. If you have some of the issues that we've talked about that allow these folks to get into MGM and Caesars, if you have some of those in your environment today, that's okay. But fix them. Let's address those. And so that's the big thing, is letting folks know that we don't have to eat the whole elephant all at once. It's a journey. Let's do a gap assessment. Let's find out where the holes are that the attackers are going to use, and let's pick one and fix it. And then we move on to the next and fix it. It's not insurmountable. A lot of times we get this paralysis because there's so much to do. There's so many ways that the malicious actors can get in. And so we end up not doing anything. That's definitely not the solution. Pick a spot, start. We all started somewhere on this journey. If we can help out with that, great. We can do staff augmentation. We can help you with security programs and policies and procedures and product rollouts, whatever it takes. But at least take that first step. And either if you need to, reach out to an organization like CI, or if you already have your own internal staffing and you're good to go, find something today and say, we're going to work on fixing this, this week or, over the next couple of weeks. Start down that journey. That's the important part.
Yeah. And I look, I run marketing for the company. And so this is the slide where I put up, and it has all of our services. Sure. Got it. You know what? That's how this works. At the same time, like, these are the things that Brad was just talking about, right? So whether you work with us or you work with somebody else, if you're not looking at these attacks, and your boards and your execs are not looking and saying, hey, are we doing risk assessments? Are we, do our pen tests include social engineering? Are we testing our users with phishing? Are we doing real training, not just like doing gotcha stuff, right? And Fred, I know you hate the gotcha stuff. Are you watching your network 24/7? Do you have somebody ready to respond 24/7? Like these, whether you work with us or somebody else, these are things every organization needs to do right now, right, Fred?
Absolutely. You have to prepare for the entire life cycle, especially of an incident. So that's make sure your plans are in place. You've got playbooks to deal with any particular incident. You're doing training and tabletops, and you've got people to bring in to parachute in when the house is on fire and you need to put it out. Usually you need some external help to do that. So you should line that up ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we are seeing a lot this year is organizations that don't have a named CISO recognize that they need somebody in that role. And doing that vCISO work actually covers a lot of the policies and a lot of the things that we've talked about today, which is a lot of what Brad does. John Luke is incident response and works as a vCISO. Sometimes Mike does vCISO work sometimes.
Just talk. I report to Jake. It sucks.
And if folks, this is how managed detection and response works. It's one of the services. We're getting out of time here, so I'm going to just go to the last slide. If folks have questions about how a SOC works and how it would work in your environment, shoot me an email, jake@criticalinsight.com. But I do want to get to final thoughts here, because the most important thing here is to get the information to you all about this. So we're going to do final thoughts. Everybody's got 30 seconds. We're going to go John Luke, then Brad, then Fred, then Mike. John Luke, you first.
It's not going to be tied to the MGM or the Caesar stuff, but a couple slides ago, you had a section talking about cloud posture management. I got to say, I'm not seeing anybody do that right. Every organization we've talked with has got major gaps in their cloud architecture and their security posture. And half the time when we ask questions like, and when do you turn off the employee's access after they leave the organization? That's when people's eyes start getting wide and they realize that they may never have turned off some people's access in certain cloud apps. So I think of all of this, if we get a few folks to just look at what's going on with their cloud environments, what services are they using, how are they being managed, that's going to be progress right there. So cloud posture all the way, top to bottom, every SaaS app, every web service, every third-party property your employees touch, make sure it's under your management.
Awesome. And before we get to Brad, my colleague Ginny is going to put a survey in the chat. We love hearing what you have to say. Also, everyone who takes the survey, we give a donation to a charity called the Society for Information Management. Train people up, have more people who do IT. Brad, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, we're not going to see this suddenly stop. The problem is the reason the bad actors do phishing and ransomware and social engineering is because it works. As long as there's a company out there that's going to fall for this stuff, they're going to keep using it. So you need to be prepared for it. If you're going to do things like immutable backups to deal with ransomware, or, have your folks do like the challenge response keys, like folks talked about in the chat before you change a password. It's very important to do this preparation work so that when you do get hit, it has that much less of an impact. So it's really about preparation, because the bad actors are not going away anytime soon.
Fred, final thoughts.
Yeah. So I saw a headline said, world shocked, impregnable casino security breached. I almost fell over, because unfortunately the casinos really spend a ton of money on physical security and fraud and casino cheating, and not that much on cybersecurity. They're not known for being big spenders in that space. So I think the dirty secret is they're like everybody else, right? They're not impregnable by any means.
So we've learned. Mike, final thoughts. Close us out.
take information you got today to your executives and say, listen, this is being done by a group of teenagers and they just took down a $33 billion company. We think some changes need to be made. We've got some suggestions. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll send out the deck. We'll send out the recording. Please take the survey in the chat. And if you need anything, shoot me an email, jake@criticalinsight.com. Hope to see you all. Tomorrow we have a webinar about AI. And, you can sign up for any of our events. Go to criticalinsight.com, click on events, and sign up for any of our events. Talk to y'all later, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
All right.
Thanks for coming.
Everyone.